Folks, it is 6:01, so I'm going to jump into it. Hello, thank you for coming. Hello. Yeah, applaud yourselves. You're here at a panel in the back hallway area. Hi, welcome. My name is Phil. I should go to the hey slide. Hey, my name is Phil Salvador. I am the library director at the Video Game History Foundation. I want to explain a little bit about who we are and what I'm doing. We're a nonprofit that is based here in the Bay Area that is helping move forward the field of video game history, and we're doing that in a couple ways. I know that's a very broad thing to just jump into and just say, like, we're fixing game history, but we have a couple specific efforts we're doing to make video game history better. It's a very broad way to put it. One thing is we are helping fight for reforms to improve the law around video game preservation. I testified at the U.S. Copyright Office this spring. I basically told the ESA they didn't understand how the video game industry worked to their faces. It was really cool. We are expecting news about that in October. Like, things are coming very fast on this, so you will know when that happens. Potentially, we could get an exemption in copyright law that makes game preservation easier. This is the kind of stuff we do. It's awesome. We've tried to bridge gaps between the community and the game industry. There's a lot of great resources out there from people who care about the video game, the community, about the history of games, versus people in the industry who are maybe more protective of their IP and trying to find middle ground between those areas. We think we're especially good at as an organization. And we're also saving a lot of rare material from video game history. We work with developers, with community members to find and collect and preserve interesting things that help people understand the history of video games, or particularly unusual titles, magazines, things that might help people research video games. Just a list of greatest hits. You might not have heard of us as an organization, but I want to mention some of the stuff we've done because you're probably a little familiar with it. A couple things in the last year. First off, if you saw a study last year that got a lot of news coverage that 87% of video games are out of print, I see some nods. I wrote that study. That was us. So that ended up being really good ammo for us arguing with the Copyright Office when the game industry said, "Oh yeah, all games are in print. It's great." We're like, "No, statistically, it's not. What are you talking about?" That was pretty fun. We've been collecting and putting out prototype games that are showing up. One weird one that we recently did was an unreleased NES game called Super Sushi Pinball. It is a sushi-themed pinball game that never came out. If you read Console Wars, that game briefly makes a cameo as a game that famously did not ship. We managed to find a copy, so that was fun. And that just, again, comes from working with folks within the video game industry who just kept a garage full of stuff. We did a YouTube video last year that kind of broke out big about finding and digging up some of the lost levels of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. If you've ever heard of the famous Cyber City level, also called Genocide City in Sonic 2 that was never finished, we found the raw level sketches for that and reconstructed it. So, cool things like that. We also have a podcast we do called the Video Game History Hour, where we bring on people to talk about video game history. It's been on hiatus for about a year. Spoilers, we haven't announced, but it's coming back by the end of the year. We've been banking episodes for that, so look forward to some more of that. But I'm the library director. I'm not the Sonic level reconstruction director of the Video Game History Foundation. So the big thing I've been working on since I started about 3 years ago is we are building a library of video game history materials. We think the best way to understand video game history is to have access to the stuff of video game history, to be able to see behind the scenes, look at marketing and game production, look at what the press was saying, what was being sent out in press kits. We've been building this enormous library with, I think at this point I've cataloged 7,000 to 8,000 video game magazines. In addition to you can see those boxes back there, just tons of things from developers. We want to be a digital-first library. We have been digitizing as much of this as we can. I have been building out a digital library that, when we launch it, is going to be free and accessible for everybody to do research with, which we are really thrilled about. Equity for access to materials. That's great, yeah. Okay, here's the thing about this panel. My original plan for this panel was we were planning to launch the library right before MAGWest, and the goal was going to be, we have all this cool stuff, we haven't announced it and shown off to people, it's going to be really exciting, we can finally talk about it. That has not panned out, unfortunately. The bad news is that we've had to delay our launch because of technical issues. There's been external tech stuff, which I was dealing with Friday morning before I came here to MAGWest. So the bad news is we can't do that original idea of just showing you all the cool stuff in the archives, which I'm bummed about it too. So I was trying to think, though, of what we could do as an alternate panel idea. Like, what else could we show you with the library that would make for a fun panel? And I thought about it, and then I said, screw it, let's just do the first one anyway. We have so much cool stuff I want to show you. So this is the irresponsible fun option. So just quick intro. Everything you are about to see in this panel is going to be accessible to the public for free at launch. We have other things that we're not talking about just yet that we're still processing. But when we launch the library in, I'll even say the coming month, singular, hopefully, It's coming up very fast, but all of this will be accessible to you. One thing that's not accessible right now is the physical library itself, but this is our library. We are based in, if there's Bay Area locals here, we're based in Emeryville, California. Yeah, you know Emory. Okay, great. When we go, there is an IKEA there. It's when we go to other places like, Super MAGFest, we have to say we're in Oakland, but you know what we're talking about. We're in Emeryville here. But we have our physical library. We have all these, things we've been collecting, all these materials. We also have a second. We just recently got a giant overflow storage room filled with all sorts of, again, just like there's a box just labeled like magazines. Like I haven't looked in that. I don't know what the hell's in that box. We're trying to consolidate all of our storage here to start working through it, but there's just so much stuff we have to get through. You joke, but that box section back there, we're not talking about yet, but there's some amazing stuff there. Keep quiet about that for now. But I want to talk first about what we don't collect, just to set the ground here. I see you're here, Mason, from the Maid. People can see the Maid's great exhibit right outside the console hall area. We don't do what they do. We do not do playable preservation. We don't collect retail games, retail hardware, manuals, anything like that. The reason being that there are other places like the Maid, or Stanford University, or the Strong Museum of Play, or even private collectors who are already doing this, and we don't think it's worth the money to rebuild that. Like, if we had the choice to spend $10,000 between buying a couple hundred Super Nintendo games or like flying somewhere and working with rare materials on site with a scanner, we would do that one instead. That's where we think the real urgency is right now, because there are collectors. I don't think we're at risk of losing Super Mario vs. Duck Hunt. There are some rare exceptions where we do get some games. You might, if you know this, if you know, with Cuckoo's Bustle. I think a lot of folks probably don't, but this is a famously hard to find and blacklisted off the internet video game. But apart from things like that, we don't have like the giant YouTuber game wall behind us. We focus on contextualizing materials. We like to say that we try to collect context for helping people understand the history of video games. And that means a lot of things. We're jumping to it right now. First off, the big one is video game magazines, which you saw in these pictures. We have a pretty substantial archive of video game magazines. I want to say about 98% of the video game, computer game magazines in the US. There's really weird things, like one issue of like Tips and Tricks magazine from 1994 that we've never seen a copy of. Like, there's random isolated things, but we have most of it at this point. And this is great, all these magazines. This isn't something you can use for research, though. The goal of our library is we want to build something people can use to study video games. And that's, we don't have a big library. We can't accommodate people flying out to Oakland to sit here and read every video game magazine on site. So we have a couple things we have to do. We have to digitize these magazines, and we have to make them searchable. So first part of that, digitizing. How many folks have gone to the Internet Archive or somewhere and read an old game magazine before? Yeah, like everybody. Okay, so we're not stupid. We know that people have done this before. So we tried to work smarter, not harder on this. There are a lot of great community places out there that have been scanning video game magazines, like RetroMags, or there's a site called Out of Print Archive that's really great for things from the UK. Gaming Alexandria has been scanning a lot of rare magazines. So we've been partnering with them on this. With permission, we are using the scans from RetroMags and these other sites to build out digital versions of what we have physically, which is really great. We're really happy somebody else has already done this work, and we're able to build on it and turn it into a better resource. But we do also come across rare video games that we have to do our own scans of as well, so we've been investing in technology and tools to do that. So hypothetically, let's say we get in a big stack of magazines that haven't been scanned. That was terrifying to film, by the way. So we do a couple things. So our rule is we don't scan anything unless we have a duplicate. Usually scanning a magazine is a destructive process because you have to debind the magazine or in some way separate the pages out to get a high quality scan. So when we get duplicates in, we do a couple things. First off, we have this ridiculous laser-guided paper cutter you see here, where we line up the paper cutter and shear the spine off. You use that paper cutter. It's so fun. It's great. So we separate the raw pages out, and then we have this scanner here that can do 600 DPI, 50 pages a minute. So we just put a magazine in it, feed it in, and then this is what. Look at that. We just got a high-quality scan that we can. It's amazing. It is this printer OEM costs as much as a good used car. We got it for cheaper. We didn't spend all our money on this thing, but totally worth it. This is what it looks like on the inside. It is a terrifying device, but it gets really good results. The issue here is that we have images. We have thousands of video game magazines scanned. That's not a good resource yet for research because you have to thumb through it and find the contents. We wanted everything to be text searchable, which ended up being way harder than we thought it was going to be. It took us like half a year to figure out what to do with this problem. So there are text recognition engines out there. It's called optical character recognition. It is designed to work on documents like this, like a plain document with dark text on white background, high contrast text. If you read a magazine from like the 90s and early 2000s, this is what they looked like. This does not lend itself well to text recognition software, so we had to come up with our own solution to that. So our director of technology, who's in Georgia, worked on a solution basically using like Amazon's cloud machine vision services and kind of hijacking that to make PDFs searchable. We had to like spend half a year making this tool to work with it. We called it the Optical Character Recognition for Archival Purposes System, oh crap, because that's how we felt when we decided to undertake this problem. But the results really speak for themselves. So this horrifying page here was from a magazine called Die Hard Game Fan. Graphic design was their passion. It is a truly horrifying magazine. So first example, a thing called Tesseract OCR. This is an open source text recognition software. It's used by the Internet Archive and a lot of other places. This is what it turned up from this page. Basically, everything in that middle section was damaged. So then we have ours, and this is what it got. I'm just going to take a sip of my tea. There's whole names of companies and video games in there. My favorite is, it says Golden Axe 3 from Sega. Tesseract got Golden Axe 3 Frog. I don't know how it got the word frog instead of 4, but Golden Axe 3 Frog. So it's real good. So we've been building out the library. We're going to launch with somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 video game magazines that are fully text searchable. We're real happy with that. Instead of talking about like Nintendo Power and things that everybody knows, I want to talk about some of the really weird ones we have, because we have a lot of magazines that were not successful and nobody's ever heard of, but I think are extremely interesting from a historical perspective. First one here, Sony Online Entertainment briefly ran a magazine about their MMOs called SOE Worlds that had articles about like Sony Fanfare and EverQuest and Star Wars Galaxies, and it ran for, they did a digital preview issue, and then a year later they did a physical issue, and every letter of the physical issue was like, hey, why have you stopped publishing this magazine? They didn't do a great job with it. There's only 2 issues. We don't hold on that magazine. Another good one here is this. I love this magazine, Digital Diner. So our company is based in the same building as Digital Eclipse, which is the game studio that does a lot of those classic game compilations and interactive documentaries. And one of the folks at Digital Eclipse was the editor of this magazine. So I've asked him about this, and he said this was meant to be like Rolling Stone for the internet age. It's like looking at online culture. So they would do things like cover the Nerf Cyber Strike gear or like weird peripherals. They covered like a pyramid that sends pager communications to your computer when you have emails. Like just really weird esoteric stuff. But it also has like one of the first reviews of Super Mario 64 that ever came out. So really interesting context, just a different angle. And it has interviews with like famous people from the game industry, like this interview with veritable video game industry icon Tommy Tallarico, which, okay, everyone's laughing. It's actually a really interesting interview because this was earlier in his career, and he's very upfront about things. And he's like, yeah, I fake it till I make it. It's like, everything I do is for posturing an image. And he's very direct about it in a way that I actually really appreciate and think is interesting historically. We have this magazine here called The Cursor. This ran for 2 issues. We have both of them. This was a lifestyle magazine for game developers. So, like, there was some, like how to do game design, how to cover tech, but it was also things like, how do you deal with toxicity on your management team? Or they got an article from someone who's like, I sabotaged my project at work, here's why it was cool. Like, it's fascinating, yeah. So, like, there's a lot of just weird that this magazine existed. It's very short-lived, but fascinating. Another one that's really cool is a magazine we have called Future Play. This was a magazine for a retailer called World Nintendo that sold Nintendo games. And it's interesting because there are a lot of ads in this magazine for first-party Nintendo titles. Nintendo early on did not do ads for their first-party games. They had Nintendo Power. They weren't running ads for Mario in a magazine or something. So there is an ad here for Tetris for the NES. We think this is the only ad that was ever run for Tetris for the NES. Just bizarre, because it was like, hey, we want to advertise Nintendo products. Can you make some ads for us? Some of them are not as good. There were some really like phone-in-is, like box art, and it's like, this game is great, and it's like, okay, great, good job. But I think it's really cool. This is like the ad for Tetris that exists. So that's just an overview of the magazine stuff. Again, about 2,100 magazines. There's some really interesting nooks and crannies we can't get into with these, but some really unique things that no one's seen before because we've been just waiting to figure out how to scan them properly, and now we have a way to do that. But now I want to get to the stuff that I think is really cool, which is ephemera. I mentioned that we like the things around video games. We like things that explain how games were made and marketed and understood. Things like stuff from video game events, marketing materials. We have a lot of this. We have some good context, I like to say. And so I want to show you some of my favorites in the collection right now. One of the cool ones is we have a huge collection of guidebooks from events. So back in the day before you could just get like the Sketch app or whatever, they would print physical guides, which have like directories of everyone who was at the event and everything that was being shown off, full schedules. So this here is our collection of guides from the Consumer Electronics Show and the Game Developers Conference. That has like lists of everything. So the one I like to show off is folks E3, right? Pour one out for E3, RIP. We have a nearly complete collection of E3 guidebooks. So like, if you've ever tried studying one of these, you're usually just like looking at like a blurry video on YouTube from 20 years ago. Here is the directory from E3 2003 with a list of every single company that was at the event, and it tells you where they were. You can see what projects they were showing and who was there running the booth. They have everyone's individual names, so you can figure out like if you're trying to figure out how a game was marketed. Now you have the name of the marketing director who was there at E3. Incredible stuff. We have most of them from 95 to 2007. I think we're only missing one that we haven't scanned yet. We have maps. Like, this is the map for the first E3 in 1995. Look how big the PlayStation booth is. It was like half the event. It's just interesting context to know, like, that's how all this was happening. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah, it's versus, like, how big Sega's would. I'm sure. Actually, Sega has 3 separate booths, but their days were numbered at that point. But also things that no one's heard of. I don't know how much folks know about E3. There was a section called Kentia Hall at E3, which is where all the weird crap was. It was like, this was the main hall, and then Kentia was where like the cheap booths were, where it was people doing like homemade VR and weird independent stuff. And we have a list of all that. We have things like, from this 2004 guidebook, there was the Hong Kong Pavilion at E3. I've never heard of this before. But this is the ad they made. You can go see what was shown off at the Hong Kong Pavilion. Like, short of a time machine, this is as complete as you can get going back and looking at E3. Did you know there were panels at E3? I did not either until I looked at these. This one is from 1996, I think, and it's like, hey, games are 3D now. We should talk about that. And like, that's the panel, and it was like, it was a new thing at the time. You know, they did like Mario 64 was a month away from coming out in the U. It came out September 96, several months away at this point, but it was still like, okay, how are we handling this? Where are we looking at consumer interest in 3D versus 2D games? And they got like legit people from Microsoft and like Creative Lab like to talk about what was happening. So just knowing this was going on is fascinating. So event guidebooks will launch with a lot of those too. We're also slowly building, and this is where things from y'all might actually help. We're slowly building a collection of player-made ephemera. A while back, we purchased some magazines on eBay. And the guy sent us a package. He clearly saw the address said Video Game History Foundation on it. And he was like, oh, I should send this to you as well. He had gone to an estate sale for like an Air Force veteran. And while he was there, he found a giant pile of homemade maps from playing NES games in the 80s. So this is his homemade map of playing Zelda 2. That's amazing that he just held onto the stacks, and we've scanned all of those. This is just great for understanding how people play games, because so much of the story of video games is about what the community does with it and how people interpret it. It's not just the marketing material, it's people working with this stuff and playing through it. So like, this is someone playing Zelda 2 in 1988 and how they were working through playing the game at that time on graph paper, mapping out all the dungeons. I think that's amazing, and I love that we're able to provide, you know, access to this material. I showed this to a friend who's a scholar who does like play research and like how people like played chess in, you know, the 1800s. And she said, yeah, like the only reason we're able to study that is that like sociologists collected that material. So like 50 years from now, it's going to be a big deal that we can have access to original maps. Point being, if you like sketched out designs and Tears of the Kingdom on a napkin, please give that to us. That actually is historical information. That's really cool. We also just have things from things around video games. Did anyone ever watch the show Video Power back in the day, the game show? I heard some moments. This ridiculous competitive game show. So we got contacted by someone who was on the show back in the day, and he sent us all the paperwork that they got when they were contestants on the show. Yeah, so like there's this segment where they have like, hey, try to stump Johnny with a question, and we have proof that they were pre-given questions to try to stump him with, so it was all scripted. I think that's great. We have this form where it's like, all right, here for tax purposes, here's how much your prizes were. I'm not sure how long we'll watch the video, but he was Chris in this video. I'm not sure if we'll see Chris show up, but not that kid. He's having a time of his life, though. But just incredible. So that's the kind of stuff that we love, just to see how people worked with video. Is that Chris? No, that's David. Okay. I swear it was anyway. Maybe it was David. I can't remember his name. Anyway. Other things we have. We've been collecting a lot of catalogs from retailers. So, for instance, this very weird ad came from an electronics boutique, I think, where they had this ultra-violent PlayStation game, but also you can get Super Mario World on the same page. It's weird, but it also gives you a lot of context for how games are being sold and marketed. I mean, it only goes so far when you're a company putting out ads. That's one thing, but if you're a retailer, this kind of gives you insight into it. I don't have a picture, but I have this great guide that it was again, I think it was an electronics boutique, but the cover, it was Final Fantasy VII, a plush Barney doll that interacts with Windows 95, and Netscape were the three cover items from their catalog. And it's like, this kind of sums up what 1997 was very well. But it also was a really good insight into like what was happening with the economy around video games. I actually got to use this like in our arguments at the Copyright Office. This is a price guide from FuncoLand from 1997. You can see how much every game cost. It's very demoralizing. You can look at it. It's like, what do we have here? Earthbound. $35 for a copy of Earthbound. What a steal. It's a lot more now. For just the cart, but like back then, like that was, I think, just recouping the cost of the cartridge, but now it's hundreds of dollars. The one I didn't show is they were selling Little Samson for 99 cents, which, for folks who aren't moaning in pain, that game costs about $2,000 loose now. So it's a really good point of comparison. Like, again, with the copyright stuff we did, one of the arguments we tried to make is that game publishers on their websites saying, like, if you want old games, go to the used market. And we're like, you probably wrote that in the late 90s. It's not 1997 anymore. You can't get these games at a cheap price. It's becoming antiques for nerds. Like, it's not really the same thing. So it's just great to have that point of historical comparison, looking back at these guides and seeing what they retail for. Another thing I've been doing in the last month scanning is we have a lot of press kits from game publishers, where it's things like, when they were marketing games at trade shows or trying to get retailers to buy their games, they would make folders with like press information. It really gives you insight into how they thought of them as products and how they were positioning things. So this, I think, is one of our crown jewels. This is the marketing kit from Power Glove, which, here's the thing, it's easy to think of it as a joke. This thing is over the top. I need it plays automatically in a second. Will it? Is it gonna? There we go. It is a giant 4-page fold-out folder, and then there's a section at the back. Under that hand, there are pages that have like, here's our product strategy and our marketing and our market research. It's like, it's a joke now, but it was a product at the time. They took it seriously, and having this object really helps you make sense of that. Where it's like, oh, they actually put thought into this. It wasn't just some random hilarious piece of junk. This was actually something they were trying to sell and get people excited about. This one I think is especially cool. This was Nintendo's, a folder they gave out at the Consumer Electronics Show, the Winter Consumer Electronics Show 1987. And it gives you a ton of insight into how they were positioning the NES and how they were trying to get people interested in what kind of titles. One of the big things they keep showing off in this press kit is, if we think of like 1987 classic Nintendo games, like everyone can think of like what the biggest NES game that year was, right? Of course, it's Squoon. Huge deal. There's a lot of Squoon stuff in this. There's a flyer, there's like a separate thing from Nintendo about like their product line. Lots of mentions of Squoon. There's also just like a press kit that just mentions some other game they're coming out with called The Legend of Zelda, which no one's big enough. But Squoon, though, holy like cow, like everyone was big on Squoon, but it kind of gives you perspective on like how they were positioning things. Like maybe they were showing Zelda off more in person. It's not really clear, but I think, this flyer was provided by a company called IREM. They were big on Squoon. They were pushing all their marketing stuff to Nintendo. Most of Nintendo's press kit is just typewritten, but some companies are willing to push flyers. It's just neat to actually be able to see that and try to imagine, like, okay, if you got this press kit in 1987, what would you care about? Would you have honed in on Nintendo's exciting first-party thing they're putting a marketing push behind? Or would you be pulled aside by the siren call of Squoon and all the flashy colors and sharks and stuff? Sorry. Other things we have, though. Something really cool. We just got a donation here. I saw, unfortunately, the person who was cosplaying as the Hunter from Bloodborne came in and then stepped out. We got a really cool donation of promotional material from Software games. This was a hardcore fan who has just been collecting everything from Software games. Not like, just the games, but like behind the scenes, so like the signs they would have in stores, things they sent to the press, and he pre-digitized all of it and donated to us, and it's extremely cool because it's 30 years of FromSoft history. It's like all the way from Kingsfield 1 to Shadow of the Erdtree, like everything they ever did. And you can really see how stuff evolved over time and how they marketed their games and their confidence in their brand over time. I really like this one. This is one of the cool things we have. Is this is the press kit they gave to reviewers of Bloodborne. It was like a bound leather book that was hollowed out on the inside, and that's where the CD would be for the the review code of Bloodborne. Like they were previously, it was just like CDs and envelopes. But this they were taking very seriously. We also have the reviewer guide for Bloodborne, which mentions the review embargo time and the terms for what you could do when you reviewed the game. So this has online servers are not enabled prior to this, blah, blah, blah. Absolutely no screenshot or video capture is allowed prior to the patch. Just helps you understand the people who were reviewing Bloodborne, what they were seeing and how they was being presented to them. This collection, I think, compared to some of the stuff we'll look at in a second, I think for raw research value is maybe less exciting. But honestly, the reason I prioritize it is that a lot of it is sick as hell. This poster for Armored Core Project Phantasma is the coolest thing I have seen in my life. We have the actual poster. I want to get it professionally framed and put it up in the library. It's so cool. But another really cool thing we have, do you folks remember GamePro magazine? Okay, also, just realize this whole presentation is just, here's the cool thing we have for the next hour. I hope you're enjoying that. So GamePro, when they were making articles about video games, they would have like screenshots, they would have art from game publishers. How they got that is, publishers would either mail them a CD or a zip disk or email them stuff. And GamePro backed all that up. They had let's burn a CD and just put all the art on here. So if we ever do want to do an article, we can dig up their press release and dig up their art. We got that. That is GamePro magazine. That is the raw ingredients of GamePro magazine. It is over 700 CDs with basically all the art and press material you can imagine for every notable video game from 1995 to about maybe 2010-ish. It's incredible. Like, here's just one CD we found. And I want to say, by the way, we are launching with the first 100 CDs. We're not launching with everything. All these CDs are in obsolete formats nobody knows how to work with anymore. It's like publishing formats from the 90s. So it's like, oh, this CD has all this original art from Mortal Kombat, but it's like a Macintosh picked file embedded in a Quark Express layout. Oh, god damn it! Like, what do we do with this? So it's taking a while to get through these. We have things like this CD labeled FF7 art. Here it has all the high-res versions of the art from the loading screen from Final Fantasy VII. It's weird to see it this high-res. That Mortal Kombat art I mentioned, here's the original art for characters from Mortal Kombat, which is just a really cool thing to have. They would also have, again, press releases, screenshots, anything they wanted to send to GamePro. And one thing I really like is that they got sloppy with it sometimes. Frequently it was like, oh, we got to send things to GamePro. What do we do? Just copy all of our publishing assets and send it to GamePro magazine. Whatever, who cares? Because it wasn't meant for public consumption. They would pick and choose. So one of those is it was a game for PS1 that many people have not heard of called Excalibur 2555 AD, I think is the name. No, okay, one person's heard of it. Yeah, shout out to you. Thank you. But what they did was they just copied their folder where it was like the manufacturing assets they sent to Sony and just didn't think about it. So we have the raw layout files for making PS1 box art, which includes all the templates, so we can make some stupid ass games that nobody would ever play. Yeah, 8-player games with mouse required, link cable, full memory card. A lot of cool stuff in there. But speaking of people being careless with things, so this next thing I'm going to show you is not launching with the library. We've already put it on the Internet Archive previously. But I figured I needed to show this because this was MAGWest, and the theme this year, I needed to bring this up. We have the press kit for Persona 2 Eternal Punishment, which is cool, but it's really cool for a specific reason. On there, it has obviously photos, videos, but it also has this document explaining the game, and here's the characters, and here's their height, and here's their hobbies, and weird things where the translation wasn't right. The magazine she writes for called Coolest is called Crest in this translation, not what it is in the final game. But here's what I found interesting about it. If you look at the text, it says the proposed title Persona 2 Eternal Punishment is the latest chapter, and it describes you don't need to play Persona 1 to understand that. Why would they send a press kit to the press talking about the proposed title? I think what they did was this was Atlus's internal push to get Eternal Punishment published in the US, and they just copied and pasted it onto the press CD and didn't think about it. So this is the pitch doc for Persona 2 that we have. Because they just sent it to the press because they were being kind of sloppy about it. I think that's really cool. So there's a lot of things like that. A lot of the CDs, like I haven't been able to dig into the content too much, but like I have a friend who's big into Doom, and I sent him some screenshots of Doom 64. He's like, oh yeah, that screenshot, that's a super high quality screenshot of a weapon that's not in the final game. Like there's once the subject area expertise people start looking at this stuff, I guarantee we're going to start finding things nobody's ever seen before. But I don't know every single video game, so I can't dig into anything like that. That's where y'all come in. You got to do the research and figure it out. So we've shown a lot of context. We've shown a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. We haven't gotten to the good stuff yet. So we're going to talk about special collections now. This is the really good stuff. Thank you, Blingy, for making this gift for me. So when I say special collections, we often work with game developers behind the scenes to preserve their own materials. Frequently, someone who works in the game industry will like take a box of stuff home and just keep it in their basement, not really think about it. That's the kind of stuff we love. We love getting in touch with developers who like, oh, maybe this is worth something, maybe this is worth preserving. We can show up with a scanner and scan everything, or they can mail it to us. We've kind of done a mix of everything, but this is where I think the really unique stuff comes in, one-of-a-kind stuff. It's paperwork from behind the scenes of the video game industry. It's the making of games, team photos, videos of things the teams did. It really helps you understand what it was like to make video games for that company to work on these projects. This is the really cool stuff, and we're going to go over, I think we have 3 collections I want to show you today, things that will hopefully blow your mind. First off, the collections of Mark Flip. Most people, I would say, don't know Mark. He is a long-time, now retired game producer who was especially active in the 90s and 2000s in the Chicago area. He worked for companies like Acclaim, Konami, Mindscape, Midway, Atari, all sorts of places. You can tell he was from Chicago in that video. But he, again, just kept a bunch of stuff at home, just held on things because it was his work. We showed up at his house with a scanner. We just scanned tons of things he had. He was very generous with us. If you're in the Bay Area, you know it's significant that Mark Flipman has a basement where he kept stuff. We have a lot of lucky people from the Chicago area because they just were able to actually have things they held onto. Now, it's not things like, he didn't have like game builds or source code or anything. He had things that helped us understand the culture of these companies and what it was like to work with them. So he worked for Konami US in the early 90s. I think most people hear that and are like, oh, maybe you have like a prototype of like a Metal Gear thing. We don't have that. What we do have is the memo about Konami's smoking policy. Which is, it's very strict. It's like, this hour you can take a 5-minute break. Also, for some reason, it has a very strict no puzzles rule. No puzzles allowed in the smoking area. But it really gives you insight into like what it was like to work at the company and kind of the rigidity of the culture and things like that. We have some like awkwardly translated memos from Japan. It really gives you insight into what it was like to work there. We also have a memo. I'm going to show you part 1 of this. We have a memo that I guess at some point somebody set the Konami company van on fire, and there was an investigation. You'll find out part 2 of that when the library launches. It's not that exciting. I'll just say it right now. It was a random act of vandalism, which is very unfortunate to hit them, but just a weird thing to have, the investigation of the Konami van fire. He also did things like when he went to E3, he took a camera backstage and just filmed. You might have seen this video, actually. We put this up on YouTube over the holidays last year as a fundraiser to let people know who we are, but he just went to that was Mark in the corner with the kind of pull back hair and the beard. A lot of weird things, obviously, Legend of Dragoon. There was a lot of marketing for Planet of the Apes, but also this footage of the beta build of Majora's Mask. What the hell? I just went around and pointed the camera at every TV and filmed things. We have, people watching the original trailer for Metal Gear Solid 2, all these booths nobody's seen before. It's just really neat to have this. This only happens if you bring a camera with you and then you think, I'll hold on to this tape, and then you come back to it 25 years later. But other stuff we have from this collection, there's a lot of gold in here. He had a ton of documents. He just had a couple CDs where he just backed up his computer and saved things. So one thing we have is, in the early 2000s, GT Interactive was one of the big distributors of video games. We have a spreadsheet of all 15,000 titles they distributed. And this is as of August 2001. And it has every single, kit they would send to stores to sell. It has the cost of manufacturing for every single thing on here. So you can play running a game store at home. If you look at it, you can see things where it's Warcraft 2 CD version costs $25 for a store to buy. Or you can buy something called Assorted CD-ROM for $6.50. And it's that's where bargain bins came from. Was they were just buying things in bulk for cheap. And so you can kind of see that happening if you go through this list. They also had entries for things like Doom hat, and you can see how much it costs for a store to buy a Doom hat if you really want to. It's just incredible that he saved this stuff. Like, I don't know any other surviving copy of manufacturing costs in 2001. It's wild to me. He also saved internal documentation. This form here is what you would send to Sony to get approval to start developing your game for PlayStation 1. You would have to describe things like what genre it is, what types of inputs are expected, what kind of technical information is involved, how big your team was, how many programmers versus sound artists were involved. And when you got it, they would send this back, and this document has, you would get assigned your number for your game. This is how the process worked. Mark Flitman was not often making the games, but he was the one like making sure they got done. So a lot of his stuff is like timelines, budgets, production information. One very angry memo full of swear words that the project ran behind schedule. It's really interesting to see this stuff. And because he worked on a lot of licensed games, we have some really interesting insight into what was happening with that. We're going to talk briefly about a game that I think is not beloved, but we need to discuss it. Virtual Bart from Super Nintendo. Okay, so actually this is really cool. A while back, a prototype of Virtual Bart leaked online, just kind of out of context, and there were some changes, mostly visual changes. So for instance here, for folks who don't know, this very weird video game, you play as Bart Simpson strapped into, like, he goes to the science fair and there's a VR machine, he gets strapped into it, he goes into all kind of virtual scenarios. It's not a good game. But early on, he had this kind of cyber sci-fi helmet, and then later on, in the final version, he has kind of like a Commander Keen looking helmet, just a bike helmet with goggles strapped on it. Why did they change that? We hadn't known previously because we had the beta version, we had the final version. But this is where I think our collection is really unique and useful. We have the memo from 20th Century Fox explaining that Matt Groening had requested some changes to the game after reviewing it. And one of those changes is the title screen we have modified the headgear configuration to appear more like a kid's science project. So Matt Groening thought it was off-brand, and they changed it, is the reason that happened. So we have this connective tissue that explains, what came between these different parts of the making of the game, which I think is that's the kind of unique stuff we're pursuing for our collection. Now, if folks read the panel description for this panel, I did promise some lost media. I'm going to show you something we've never shown anyone before, nobody's ever seen. It's hella stupid. It's also really cool. I want to talk to you about a game. It was a horror basketball theme that was going to launch with the N64 that no one's ever heard of, called Monster Dunk. So here's the story of Monster Dunk. Mark Flitman worked for Mindscape, which I think they put out a lot of titles, not a lot of them are beloved nowadays. But around the time he was starting, they were starting to look into, we should make things for the next generation of consoles. So we have a presentation from them. I don't know who it was for, if it was a pitch to Nintendo or to their higher-ups, I don't know. But it was a pitch for, we want to make games for the upcoming Nintendo Ultra 64. This was circa 2004. And their idea was like, let's make a game where it's like an NBA, but with like movie monsters and outrageous humor. And this was an external pitch they got, and they were serious about it. They made a very detailed design document explaining why this was a good idea and like what the idea was. Like, okay, so you saw Mark Flitman in the Chicago Bulls jacket. He was obviously big into that, but that was like the peak Jordan era. Basketball was bigger than ever, and it was like, let's make a basketball game that appeals to a younger audience with fun, public domain characters. So the idea was, like targeted to kids. Kids like horror, like creepy horror movie stuff. Let's make a horror-themed basketball game. It's a weird idea, but the pitch kind of made sense. And they went all out building this thing out. And we had the concept art for the characters. Classic characters like Count Dunkula. Or, on Team Mummy, we've got Rap Master Jam. You might have seen earlier, we got Slamasaurus Rex on there. And my favorite, maybe my favorite thing in the collection, we had the art of the ghost of Abraham Lincoln. This was actually in development at a game studio. And it was this crazy ambitious project. They had big ideas. We also have a memo called Monster Dunk Project Issues. That is one of the most painful things I've ever read, where they just are grappling with the idea that they will never get this game done. They're like, we need to like quadruple our art team. I'm not sure if you can see there. They said they need someone who can write a basketball engine and handle controller. Like they didn't have a programmer to like make a game for the N64. They were like a year into this. It was like, oh, we're not going to be able to finish this thing. They have a timeline, and it's like we need like with the staff we have like 6 years to finish this project. it did not make launch. This is the last we have of this project. There's no surviving build. I don't think it ever got to the point where it was really meaningfully playable, if this is any indication, but this is why we like context. I think a lot of people chase the idea of like a prototype game and like, oh, we freed this game from this acrylic case. We have all this great information, but there's only so much you can learn from playing even like a beta version of the game. But having this connective tissue, I'm happier to have the Ghost of Abraham Lincoln than I am to have like a buggy, unfinished version of Monster Jam. So that's the kind of stuff we're trying to go after as the Video Game History Foundation. Also because it's just easier to digitize and share without running afoul of copyright law. So that's also a nice thing too, is that we're able to share these things more easily in our library system. So that's a peek at what's going on with Mark Collections Collection. More collections we have. There's more stuff. Tom Payne. This one is really cool. Tom Payne was a designer and artist in the video game industry who, among other jobs, worked at the Sega Technical Institute. I don't know if folks know this, but Sega had a branch in the Bay Area in the U.S. where they were making like an incubator for game design. They brought over some of their top designers like Yuji Naka. I almost said R.I.P., but he's not dead. He's just under house arrest, I think, or probation, whatever he's on right now. So they brought those developers over and had them work with American developers to learn how to like make video games better. Sonic 2 was made at the Sega Technical Institute in the U.S. So Tom was one of the artists. I think only Metropolis of the stuff he made ended up in the final game. So when I mentioned those Sonic 2 Lost Levels earlier, that's what we have. Is we have the raw art of him designing the levels for Sonic 2. And this is what we were able to use to reconstruct those lost areas. Well, this is Metropolis. You can see up there it says Metropolis. But it's really neat to be able to actually like look at how they made the game and how they designed it on graph paper and how they made certain tile configurations. But the thing I'm really excited about with it is they also got a lot of art from Japan to use as reference for this. So a lot of it is the original art that was used. This is concept art for Sonic 1 that was shared with the team for Sonic 2 to help make their game. So we've got all these great high-quality pieces of art like Sonic and his pals. Look at that little, that is like the pencil sketch of Sonic. It's a photocopy of it, but it's the pencil sketch of Sonic. So much cool stuff. This is my favorite. I had not moved through a lot of this, but I'm just trying to find things to show here today. We have the original, like photocopies, but it's photocopies of the original sketches of the opening animation for Sonic 2. It's just so cool to see that, and obviously you can go by it frame by frame and put the notes on it and all that, but just seeing the raw ingredients that went into the game is incredible. I think people often don't think about artists when they think about things from behind the scenes in video games. Like, it can tell you a lot about how they were made, how things were changed, how characters were iterated. We have a lot of good stuff. It's not in the presentation, but we also have a lot of the original character concept art for the game Go-Go Hypergrind for GameCube, if anyone here is like a real sicko and knows that one. It's interesting. So you can see how the characters evolved and how their names evolved and some of the notes back from Atlas about what to do with that. It's really cool. There's also this photo. That's Tom Payne in the center and looking like Mason here in the front. That's Tom Payne with I forget who is in order, but I believe it's Yasuhara and Yuji Naka are at least two of the people in there. I think they were on a trip to New York getting espresso and chain smoking, as you did in the early 90s. But my favorite collection that I want to talk about for a second is the Cyan collection. This one blows my mind. This is maybe the coolest thing I've worked on in my life. It's a great example of working with developers and also giving back to the community and that bridging of gaps I mentioned earlier and how we're trying to work with that. So have folks played Myst and Riven, the Myst? Okay, we got some Myst heads here. Okay, yeah. Sound off for Myst. Okay, so, great games, foundational adventure games, hugely important. They were some of the first big CD-ROM games. I think Myst sold several million copies, ton of money for Cyan. So there is a documentarian, Philip Shane, who is making a documentary about the making of the Myst series, called The Myst Documentary. I'm obviously a big fan. I was a Kickstarter backer, and at one point, they went behind the scenes, they went to Cyan's headquarters, they went to their storage room, they dug up these boxes. This was something like 200 videotapes they had, where it was just everything they filmed, all the FMV footage for the games, all the behind the scenes, over 100 hours of footage. And in the Kickstarter, they were like, we're going to look through these tapes, there might be some cool footage we can use in the documentary. And I remember thinking, I was looking at that and I thought, man, they should get an archive to go in there and digitize all that footage. And then I realized, oh wait, that's me. So we did. This is the original filming footage from Riven. We have not shown this yet. This is Atris on the blue screen. We have all the filming footage of this game, all the bloopers and outtakes. And as of this summer, I had to go back up to
There's
Cyan
a great
this
deal
summer
of history that you should know.
and root around for it. But we also found the original camcorder tapes for Myst 1, where it's just like Robin Miller in front of a green towel on the wall. Or I guess that's a green like piece of drywall or something. I can't really tell, but like it's all the original filming footage from Myst, so you could reconstitute Myst at higher quality if you wanted to. Cyan was super on board. They were like, we proposed like, hey, we want things to be accessible. Rand Miller was like, yeah, great, cool. Because we also footed the bill for it, which might have been part of the reason that we were able to do it. But there's also so much behind the scenes, interviews with, there's out of character, interviews with like the developers, tons of stuff they never used. Also messing around backstage. If folks know Riven,
come this way, won't you?
Catherine showing off her blue screen prison house.
I think you'll find it rather hungry.
Which is,
watch out for the wood stove. Ouch!
playing a little bit.
Hungry? You could have an apple here. One appears there every day, miraculously. Crazy.
Back there is Tony.
Oh, here's the balcony. Which seconds at the bathroom?
Well, there's somebody out there.
Oh my God! He's using the bathroom. Oops.
We have a lot of stuff like that. It's amazing.
Here.
They even, like, knowing this was a big deal, they even recorded the video output of their workstations they used to design the game in 3D. So this is a Silicon Graphics workstation running Softimage, and there's the 3D models from Riven. They just saved everything, like local news coverage. We have a video of the company picnic they did in 1994. They were just unbelievably open about giving us access to this stuff. And importantly, we didn't take it. We paid to digitize it and sent it back to them. I'm going to get on my library science course for a second, but this is a concept that's starting to get a lot of steam called post-custodial archiving, where it's the idea of instead of being like the British Museum and just taking stuff, you are instead working with them, digitizing it, and finding a new way to make it accessible while keeping it with the people who are already keeping the care. Like, when I went over this summer, this was their storage room. This terrified me. This is all like tax paper. That's horrifying to me. We probably won't digitize that, but they also had like maps and stuff, and that's exciting to me. But it's like, it's rare for a company to be this open about this and to be able to keep care of their materials. We don't want to take their collection they've spent so much time building and clearly care for, but we can be an extra step to make it more accessible and share it with the community and help people like Philip Shane. If we send him a hard drive with all of this footage, it's going to be in the Myst documentary. So like, it's exciting to have this reciprocal relationship. We're able to share it with the community, with historians and researchers who are using it, and to give something back to them. Like, they have marketed with this material too. Actually, this is really exciting. They just did a remake of Riven that came out recently, super high quality VR remake. Riven is my favorite video game ever, and the footage we digitized, they were able to get the original voiceovers from those videos and reuse them in the game. So I kind of worked on the Riven remake, and that to me is really exciting. So that's the kind of stuff we love doing. It's great. So this is the best possible example. But point being, what's the plan here? Okay, I've showed you a lot of cool stuff. As I mentioned at the start, if you're coming in late, all of this is going to be openly accessible to everybody for free. We are very excited about that. As soon as we sort out these outstanding lingering tech issues, I think the next week for me is going to be hell, but we're going to figure this out. But we'll be launching very soon. Please stay tuned to Game History Foundation's social media. We're going to be sharing a lot of this stuff. Obviously, the library is going to open up. We're going to start doing deep dives on the collection. We'll do blog posts, videos about it. We have enough content in here to last us through the cold winter, so it's going to be a lot of good stuff. But we are also still building up more. This is absolutely not the end of it. That storage room is almost totally unprocessed and digitized. There's so much stuff that, like, I'll open up a box and be surprised. I think there's probably a lot of, like weebs here, I'll be honest. Something I love that I was amazed by was we had a box, an anonymous donation for us, and it had a bunch of stuff from Square Enix, and one of them was the contract between Square and Arby's for marketing Final Fantasy VII Remake. So, like, all those cutesy tweets about, like, the origami river, like, we have, like, the marketing plan for that, which is just a weird thing to exist. I think, like, that one's maybe a little too new to share. I think that might run a little afoul, but, like, there's so much we have to finish processing, so many more collections. And I want to give you a tease of one of them before we wrap up here. This one, y'all will know this one. This is one of the coolest things we've gotten. We got a loan from a designer and artist named Craig Stitt. He's worked in the game industry for a long time and was also an early employee at Insomniac Games. So he loaned us his stuff to digitize, and one of the things he has is early on in the company's history, they were taking proposals for video games, and he internally pitched a game called Lifespan, which was a really interesting concept. It's a game where it takes place over 1,000 years, and you play as a dragon. You start as a kid, and you get older, you turn into a big, massive guy, and you collect gems and build your hoard, and you have to defend it against people trying to steal from you. Really interesting idea. They pitch it to their publisher, and their publisher comes back with 2 notes. First is, don't make the dragon age up because it'll make it easier to do sequels in the future. And the second note was, at the time, the PS1 was very much a hardcore gamer system. The first Christmas was going to come around, I think it was going to sell. They say, by the time you sell this game, the average age for a PlayStation audience will be younger, so try to target this to a younger audience. So Craig says, okay, I gotta make a character who's a dragon who collects gems for a younger audience. And he drew this. This is the original concept art for Spyro. We can't believe he loaned this to us to do. But so we're digitizing. We have all the design documents for Lifespan, all his art, his level designs for Ratchet and Clank, all this amazing stuff. We're going to keep building this, and we think once we have the library open, it's going to be so much easier to show developers what we're trying to do, because previously our organization was founded by Frank Cifaldi, and previously when people, when there were game preservation questions, people would say, oh, go talk to Frank, and it's that's a weird thing to do. Then it became, go talk to the Video Game History Foundation, and now we have the full process where you can say, talk to the Video Game History Foundation, here's the kind of resource we're building, here's how we put all this stuff in context. So we can have a world where you search for Spyro, and that brings up the Craig Stick collection, but also every single video game magazine that mentions Spyro, and every manufacturer asset list with the the price and cost of manufacturing Spyro. So having all of this in one centralized place where these materials are in conversation with each other, we think is transformational. We think is going to change how people study video game history. We are really excited about this. Give us 3 or 4 weeks. Hang in there, and this is going to be open to the public. But I've been talking a lot. I need down some tea. We've got 8 minutes. I'm happy to take questions about this. I could ramble about libraries all day, and I probably will. So please feel free to come up to the mic, ask questions. Happy to talk more about what we're doing here. Or if there's no questions, I can just try to freeform ramble about other things we have that aren't coming to mind that we have in the collection. I'm trying to think of which other. I think I've covered most of the really big stuff, though. Yes.
So how did you get started with all this? Obviously, you studied library sciences, but when did the lightning strike that got you in this amazing position to have to be involved with your favorite game? That's so
I've got a fun story to this about how I got involved with this. So first off, I'm a professional librarian. I have a master's degree in library science. Didn't quite know what I wanted to do with that. I worked in visual media and media preservation for many years back in DC. But I was also a game historian. I was always interested in unusual old games, kind of staying back to my childhood, playing things like Myst, and just being interested in this era no one talks about. I just got really interested in the field, and I started researching video game history more and more, and getting into it and into the issues of game preservation, and that's how it kind of ended up in this field. But specifically, I'll tell you this, because this is fun for the crowd here, about how I got in this position was I had done panels about game history at Super MAGFest over in Maryland. And one year I was like, we should really do a panel about game preservation. And the Video Game History Foundation had just launched, and I told Frank, hey, Frank, do you want to come to MAGFest and do this? I think there's funding for it. He said, yeah, sure, and we met at MAGFest. And that was the first time I interacted with Frank Cifaldi. And so when the time came around, when it was like, hey, we need to hire a professional librarian who has subject expertise in game history. So that's how MAGFest got me this incredible job. So take advantage of opportunities here to meet cool people, is my story. No, yes.
You talked about collecting video game ephemera from actual game players.
Yes.
And then your love of Cyan and Myst. I have to ask, how many Myst notebooks have you collected?
I can't find my original one. I know at home I had my original Myst notes. I can't find them. Honestly, player-made ephemera is a very recent thing for us. This was something we weren't even really considering until we got this donation. For us, it was like, oh, that's a weird thing. But as soon as we were digitizing it and sharing with that researcher I mentioned, the sociology research, they were like, this is actually really useful information. I don't quite know how to intentionally collect around that, apart from that's the thing. I would say have a booth here and be bring us your handmade mats, but people don't bring that to MAGFest. So that's kind of one of the challenges is how do you get things like that from the community? It's something that I think I've only started thinking about maybe even in the last 2 months, I would say. But it's I want to get people's Myst notebooks so bad.
Yeah. But and I came a little late. I missed this. Where are y'all based out of? And is there any physical part of the museum, or is it fully virtual?
That's a good question. We're based in Emeryville, so we're here in the Bay Area. We have a physical archive, but we try to discourage people using it for research as possible, only because it is small. We have a pretty small footprint. It's me and Frank full time. That's the organization right now. I mean, we have a lot of volunteers who really help us do the work we do. Excuse me, it's tea is coming. But in terms of it's hard for us to have researchers on site. So if there's things where there's no other way to do it, if it's like a physical material they have to look at, or we have some restricted stuff. We have some things that are like we can't put that on the internet. That's not going to be a good thing to do. We try to restrict those to on-site only. So appointment only is what it says in the library page right now. But we do pop-ups. If anyone goes to the Game Developers Conference, we do exhibits there as well. So we do things like that. So we do things around. Frank is at Portland Retro Game Expo right now this weekend, putting on an exhibit about things using materials from our collection. So we try to show up where the community is rather than bring them. Hello.
I'm a big fan of Video Game History Foundation.
Awesome.
I almost hate to say this. I've been reading Frank's work since I was in middle school.
He's been writing for a long. We have like the first magazine. He was just like writing some like anonymous crappy column.
I might have it in my collection.
It was Game Now. It was the second to last issue of Game Now magazine, which we always joke is a really demanding. Game Now. It's a very demanding name for a magazine.
It was the '90s, right? That was how we were. But yeah, I wanted to know. I read a lot of info about what you guys put out about this a while back. Where are you at regarding the fight to update the DMCA for digital lending of video games?
Yes. So we talked about this a little bit earlier. We are getting a verdict on that at the end of October. So we had a petition went forward. So to explain for folks really quickly, we've been working with the software preservation community to get an exemption in copyright law to make it possible if a game is out of print, a library can digitally share a copy with researchers in browser. There is a mechanism to do this under the law. The process has been underway for a while. The petition was submitted last year. I testified to the Copyright Office this spring. We're getting a verdict very soon. We've prepared a very long, hour-long video essay explaining this entire process that ready to drop if the news is good. If not, we'll be very disappointed, but we'll see what happens. But we're feeling very good about it. We think our chances are pretty good right now. It'd be a huge deal. It would be, for a rare out-of-print game, a library could spin up an emulator for a researcher to access it legally. That's transformation for video game preservation. So stay very tuned. I think we're going to have a very busy next couple months. You'll hear from us a lot.
I was curious to ask about languages in the collection.
Yes.
For now and in the future, if the entire collection is focused on English or other languages.
That's a good question. Primarily English, just out of practicality. We do collect international magazines, and I mentioned earlier we have a lot of things from Gaming Alexandria. They've been focused really heavily on Japanese magazines and things like Weekly Famitsu. We don't do it practically only because of things like shipping costs and the work involved. But so, for example, that From Software collection, that was a dedicated fan. It's almost entirely Japanese material. So that's, I think, the first thing in our catalog that has Japanese listed as the first language. So we try to be conscious of not just having a ultranational perspective on things, but it really is just limited by our own language abilities and the resources we have. At this point, we like to say we're trying to stop the bleeding, and for us, that's like developers in the Bay Area immediately, people like Cyan that we're able to get in touch with. I would love to get more from the Japanese game industry. It's just kind of a harder conversation, especially with discussions about, copyright tends to be taken a little more stringently over there. So ongoing conversations, but just this a month or two ago, I presented at the Straw Museum to play about some of these issues, and there were folks there for a separate conference called Replaying Japan, and I had some good conversations with folks in Japan about that. So we try to keep these conversations moving forward, but it's something we're conscious of. We just practically can't do a whole lot about it.
Sure. Is the OCRAP system just for English, or
just for English? Because that's what Amazon supports right now. We are waiting for the second it does Japanese. We are getting all of this from Mitsu's Tech Search, so we're waiting for that. But yeah. One more question.
So I was wondering about, so you are collecting and archiving a lot of materials.
Yes.
What about the stories of the actual people? Like, are you going are there any plans for the Video Game History Foundation to start collecting interviews,
oral histories and stuff? Yeah. So I will say we are not doing that only because of the bandwidth issue. We would love to, but again, it's two of us and there's volunteers. But my workaround to this is there are great researchers who are doing this work, people who are going out and writing monographs about video game history and doing these crucial interviews. I just buy their books and put them on the shelf. So I'm happy to enshrine the work they are doing, and I want to support them. Recently, there was we were almost at time, but there is a new open access journal of video game history called RomChip that just launched a few years ago that does really great interviews and deep dives and material, and we help them fundraise. And now they have enough money to commission original articles, to have people like go out and do those oral histories. So it's like, if we can lend our voice to interest and energy around those efforts, that's easier for us than doing it ourselves at this point. We kind of joke that it's like when people are trying to fend off a mountain lion, we're really good at making ourselves look bigger than we are. And so if we can leverage things that way, I think it's easier to do it. I almost dislocated my arm during that fundraiser stream. Long story, ask me afterwards how I almost hurt myself. We're at 7:01, we're currently wrap up. Thank you all so much for coming, appreciate it. And don't forget to come back here in 2.5 hours for a celebration of Final Fantasy VII. Nothing's wrong with the panel, don't worry. Nothing's peculiar about it, it's not a trap, don't worry about it. 9:30, don't worry.